What was the state of democratic institutions in your country when you took office? And what efforts did your administration undertake to strengthen these?
Well, by 1992, Ghana had promulgated the Fourth Republican Constitution, which essentially is democratic. It provides for institutional arrangement of checks and balances, and, enshrining democracy or democratic governance of multi-party system, respecting the rule of law, respecting the fundamental human rights of citizens, and talking of free speech, and also recognizing the fourth estate, the media. So everything was in place for good democratic governance. But the truth was that this constitution was promulgated after a long period of military dictatorship of about 20 years. In fact, from 1972, when Busia was overthrown, till the year 92, it's exactly 20 years. But Ghana had been under military dictatorship. What didn't make the changeover to constitutional governance totally democratic was that the last military dictator converted himself, just put down the uniform to put on civilian gaps to lead the government that was ushered in on the introduction of the constitutional rule. And this guy, President Rawlings, was so steeped in militarism. His bearing, his language, everything about him was military. But he led the party that was declared winner on the adoption of this constitution. So in that sense, yes, I can say the country went back to democratic governance with a very military man leading the first government into this new regime. And he stayed in power from 92 till 2000. Then I won the presidential election in the year 2000 to take over power from him. Fortunately, he didn't resist the handover. So in a way, history was made. The first time in Ghana when power was transferred from one party to the other peacefully. So that was meant to happen. When I assumed office, a law that had been in place that from colonial times that had muzzled the media from criticizing governments, called criminal libel law. My government decided as its first measure to repeal the law. So the media would have true freedom of expression. With the repeal, we found that the landscape, the media landscape changed. There were so many FM stations that came into being, and which took to the airwaves like a duck to water. So every morning all over the country, these FM stations started off with observations and criticisms, political criticisms, which got so much support from the people at large, and which helped deepen the democratic expression of the people, and which has continued till now, and in a way deepening the democratic roots of society, which I believe will be sustained by the people generally. I don't think it would be easy at all for anybody to think of a reversal to the times when we suffered monologues and dictatorships from strongmen. I think those days are put behind us. My government respected the Constitution both to the letter and to the spirit, where we subscribed to the rule of law. We respected individual initiative, and I believe we ran an all-inclusive governance. Minority groups, civil society organizations, religious freedoms and tolerance, because the Constitution provided for a secular state. And we adhere to all these principles. And this is how the 2 terms we served the nation were implemented.
Thank you. What were the most important reforms during your administration, and how did these further democracy in Ghana? And also, what were the biggest challenges to making reforms, and how did you overcome them?
Repeat the question for me.
Okay. Well, do you want to do two parts?
You break.
Okay.
So go.
What were the most important reforms during your administration, and how did these reforms further democracy in Ghana?
Well, I've talked of the repeal of the criminal libel law, which liberated the media and people generally. I believe that was the main thing, because after that, and with the respect for the Constitution, where the independence of the judiciary was respected, and also the parties could operate under the say independent electoral commission freely. But we believe everything came together to strengthen democracy and to allow freedom of expression and of choice within the community. But I would also say that because of the sound economic management, various groups didn't have to depend on the government too much to compromise on their independence of stance political. So everything worked for deepening of democracy and democratic practice.
Okay.
Basically, nobody was prosecuted for their political beliefs.
No, that's what the parties.
Basically,
Right.
So the entire school, in fact, Ghana became a beacon on the continent of Africa for good democratic practice and governance.
So what was the greatest challenge to making those reforms in that area? And how did you overcome those challenges?
We didn't meet any challenges from the people were thirsty for democracy. They had suffered military dictatorships for so long, and the economy had stagnated under the military rule. Even with the first 8 years of the Fourth Republican Constitution, which the NDC, the opposing party, governed, even though the Constitution was democratic, because the leader had been the dictator till the Constitution was adopted. There was a sort of psychological barrier and fear that democracy could not blossom fully. But with the election that brought me into power, we believe that barrier in a way was broken. And the people were enjoying the freedoms they were getting under the Constitution, and they just carried on living democratically. We didn't have to do any special reforms. We just ran the government normally, improving the economy, taking some hard decisions, though, to turn the economy around, and allowing the private sector, for instance, to grow, to blossom. And as a result of this, we attracted so much foreign direct investments and local direct investment from the private sector that people just didn't feel too dependent on the government as the patron and awarder of all contracts. People, and so to make the point, see, the GDP grew from a low of 3.5% in the year 2001 to 8.4% by the time we stood down or stepped down as government in 2008. Within a short space of 8 years, the GDP more than quadrupled, and reflecting the freedom of activity, the relaxation of all the tensions and over-centralization of governance. We didn't have to do anything but run good government, take the appropriate decisions to free the economy, and also acknowledge the rights of the people.
Thanks. And the last question is, what recommendations or lessons learned would you share with future presidents, particularly presidents of new democracies?
If it's a democracy, then the people's opinions and rights must be respected. According to the law. And respect for the rule of law must be upheld without trying to cut corners. The argument has been in many places that you would say a vibrant economy cannot be pursued without some high-handedness on the part of government. My party did not subscribe to that. In fact, the party's motto is development in freedom. We believed we could develop economically and socially without restricting the people. Whatever restrictions had to be in place were according to the law. It's only the law that should provide the limits. But within the law, the idea was to liberate the people to take their initiatives and risks, legitimate risks. And this my party upheld and respected. And we found that running the government this way really made for accelerated development, economically and socially. We also found in due course, especially respecting the private sector, that the government naturally and instinctively worked hand in hand with the private sector, to form the cornerstone for proper socio-economic development. So the concept of public-private partnership as a necessity for the general development of the society took place under us naturally. And it is a prescription I would offer to any young government aspiring to develop democratically. People's expectations after a dictatorship tend to be high. Governments that inherit such post-dictatorial situations should not try to do everything by themselves at the public level. Governments like this should start with a partnership right from scratch between the public and the private sector, and you see that the burden would be spread a bit more comfortably around. Government would do its bit, while the private sector too would complement it. Then the economy and society would grow in tandem. I believe this is the way to do it. In fact, in due course within our government, we saw that we needed to inculcate a consciousness within the public sector that it should provide the infrastructure, the vehicle for the strong growth of the private sector, and that this arrangement would ensure that the private sector truly became the engine of growth in terms of wealth creation and also for generation of employment. Spread the wealth right to the grassroots. This is what happened, and this is the prescription I'll give to all aspiring democratic governments.